Hi, I'm glad to be here tonight. Thank you very much. This is a beautiful space. I'm glad to be here, and it's a little square that'll disappear. Great. So we'll just jump into it. So who here tonight is from the sales? I guess we're trying to think who came tonight. People from the sales industry of just lighting, or is it, or sorry, just baths, or just kitchens, or most of the time they're combined, I would think. So in sales, how many here? In design? Cool. Both hands, okay, cool. And is there any other types of, like we don't have installers? Okay, great. Anyone else from, I don't know, Intel, off the street? Yeah, no one? Okay, that's great. So this is tonight an overview, and the first time that I use this presentation, so please bear with me if I hiccup or anything like that. I promise not to dance. Well, I don't know if I can promise that. Okay, so I wanted to give actually the Illuminating Engineering Society of North America a big thank you, because they have written a big Bible that has about a dozen chapters in it, and tonight we're going to be looking at the design process. So as you heard, I've got light in my life in a lot of ways, and not only am I addicted, I guess, to lighting design by now, but what's important to me beyond lighting is to be using our light from within. And I do that in many different ways through teaching and so forth. And these are, I think, the two quotes that capture it the best. By Le Corbusier, that light has emotional power. And I think we take that for granted until there's a lighting problem. It's a bit like our nose, in a way. I can attest to that. About 3 years ago, I lost my sense of smell for about 9 months, and I didn't know if it would ever come back. And of course, you lose taste as well. And it's something that you never question, because it's always there. But when it's not there, then it's like, geez, it's like awful, or it's dark in here. And of course, by Francis Bacon, that beholding the light within us is so important. And I think that we're all radiant and all creative. And many of you here do this for a living, but I believe we are all creative. And we do this in so many different ways, again, that we take for granted. So aside from working with Superman once in a while, I do a lot of photography. In fact, this is a calendar here, the calendar girls. My models were 72 to 95. And we did a wonderful calendar together a couple years ago and raised over $10,000. Mostly they did the work. That was split between the Ottawa Food Bank and a women's shelter. So lots aside, that's the light in the heart side. And then pottery and playful things, dolls and digital art and all sorts of stuff. So life keeps me busy. From a lighting perspective, I do lots of different things over the years, from small interior jobs to large exterior and interior projects. I do some residential. This is in the middle a lighting project that we just finished in the last year, and it was fabulous to be able to play with light. And this is actually quite a big space. Here is a large chandelier that's probably almost the height of this space, that hangs all the way down into the staircase that goes down. So just lots of interesting and different things, and I think that's why it's kept me in the business, because no one project is alike. So tonight I wanted to review, of course, the lighting design process with you, and a bit about what is light anyway, and some basic design considerations, because I thought that it was maybe just a little bit boring just to talk about process, because there's no pictures to show. So I thought design considerations, and then and with some kitchen and bath pictures as well. So most of you have seen this, right? Do you see two things? Who doesn't see two things in here? The vase and the two faces. Light is just as magical as this. It's, unless you take time to see what's there and negative and positive, light and shadow, you don't realize how complex the different systems are. And this is another thing that we don't realize because our eyes do it automatically. We're always perceiving things. Most of light is actually seen on the back of our eye in the retina, and then information is sent to our brain. So in fact, perception has a huge impact on what lighting is all about, or anything really. What's amazing about this little graph is that all of the gray dots are exactly the same color. And depending on, designers here will know this well, depending on how you place color. So not only is there color against color, but also light against color. So it's very endless. So today's presentation is kind of really a generic way of wrapping our heads around something that can be endless. And one designer might have one technique or one way of solving a problem that's not necessarily right or wrong, but just different from another. So light from the Illuminating Engineering Society is radiant energy that is capable of exciting the retina, woohoo, and producing a visual sensation. That's all very well and good, but what exactly is light? If anybody had to describe it, if any of you had to describe it, like it's like this magical transparent thing. And in fact, we don't actually see light. We see no light. We see only objects that light falls on. So light is actually measured in very different ways, but we see it as a synthesis of different things. And when we're lighting projects, this is what we have to actually consider as a whole. Like, what kind of proportion do we want the space to feel, and what are we working with to start? How are we defining the space? How are we providing articulation and rhythm to the space? Are we working with textures that are shiny or textures that are matte, bright or dark? All of these will have an effect on the outcome. And of course, the choice of things that we're going to work with. So in essence, lighting design is really for, many people come to me for different reasons, but most of the time, not for my sense of humor, but they get it anyway. They come to solve problems. And in lighting, there's like the two sides, the aesthetic and the scientific or more technical side. So efficiency and productivity is always like, you want to be, in this example of kitchen and baths, obviously using those spaces so that they're more efficient and you're not, slicing your fingers off because you're in the shadows. And you're also at the same time enjoying the beauty of your space. So yes, lighting shapes our visual environment visually, but also has this profound effect on how we live. And in our homes, this certainly is true. Now, this is a slide that I show when I teach creativity and success for people that are actually transitioning in their job search. And it's so interesting to see how many people don't think that they're creative because they don't think they're artistic. But art and creativity is very different. We are all very creative. And this is a slide that I show them in reverse, giving them the metaphors of lighting. But we all do the same thing. When we, very first and foremost, we need to accept or desire change. We need to desire a new kitchen or a new bathroom, or if we need it, then we have to make a decision to do something about it. So that's step one. And these steps are actually there was this, the process of creativity was always around. It's not like we just invented it. But about 100 years ago, Mr. Wallace, I believe his name was, put very specific steps to the creative process. And they are all the same. So we've got desiring or accepting a project, and then what I call playing or entertaining some ideas. So for me, what that means is sketching some things, but also, like Jerry suggested, looking at magazines, going through my memories and also new products, web images, and just entertaining different things, getting some ideas and playing with them. And then imagining how that applies to the projects I'm going to be working on. And then, lo and behold, sleeping on it, which is actually a major important step that in our fast-paced society we tend to forget about. I actually like to nap on it. And I have come up with, actually my best ideas are often in the bathroom, in the shower. I don't know if it's the thing with water, but it's like I'm not even thinking about solving it, and all of a sudden, like, oh, I know, this is exactly how we need to do it. Thank God I don't have a paper and pen in the shower, but yeah, whiteboard, that's what I need. So that's actually a step that's important because our subconscious is always working, and now there's a lot of neuroscientific data that is out there that shows that and I don't know how they term it. I think it's different than consciousness, but our subconscious is always working. And when you allow it to just sift through all of the data and images that you have, it's a bit like dreams in a way. All of a sudden, it recreates something new. And then you get like the aha moment. And Archimedes also got his great ideas in water because he was the one who came up with a famous eureka moment when he went running down the streets naked at that in Sicily at the time, now Greece. And the king had asked him to resolve a problem of the new crown had been made, and he thought maybe it wasn't all gold. And he didn't want to destroy the crown and the jewels, so how do you figure out if it's gold or not? And of course, I'm sure that he sat at his desk for a while, but ultimately he went and took a break in the public baths. And as he entered the bath, he imagined the whole system of buoyancy, which is different things weigh different and displace water at a different degree, and hence solved the king's request. So I promise not to run down the streets naked, but those, and again, it's because he rested or took some time between things. And those can be small moments. They don't have to be on big, great projects and complex problems. Yes, it needs to happen over and over in a period of time. But even going for a walk sometimes, a 10-minute walk, or taking a coffee break, or meditating, or just not engaging with any other incoming data, that's the sleep on it phase. And that's an incredibly powerful time. And I suggest that you nap on it. It's really worth it. And then the sixth phase is appraising and validating. So it's really about, okay, I had this great idea. Is it really going to work? So sometimes, like in the case of this project, which unfortunately is no longer lit because it's the space is not used for, it was Canada and World project on Sussex Street, right close to the falls. Beforehand, we had a chance to, of course, on the coldest day of the year, go out there and test the equipment. There's always 2 mock-ups at least a year, on the coldest day of the year and the longest day of the year. That's almost guaranteed. And that's when you get a chance, in this case, to really see if that's going to work, if the lighting idea is going to work. But you don't always have a chance to borrow a luminaire, or sometimes the space isn't built. So it's also a time when it could be appraised via different kind of modalities, whether it's lighting calculations or digital imagery or all sorts of other ways. And then the implementation process is, as you know, exactly what Jerry was talking about, going through all of the next set of stages after tender to get the project built and installed and finished and fine-tuned. And incredibly enough, this process is the same thing that we do when we're cooking a meal, or not maybe our daily breakfast, but when we invite friends over for dinner and we have to want to do it, so accept the challenge and then prepare for it in these very same steps. Or gardening is another great example where you can imagine what things are like. And so we're doing this all the time, this creativity thing. So the architectural lighting phases are really broken down in these 7 steps, and we'll go through all of them in more detail. And this is often how I will put a proposal together. So sometimes the proposal might be for all of these different steps, including post-occupancy evaluation. And sometimes people just hire me for an hour or 2 of my time just to get some input. Both ways work well. It just depends on the size and the complexity of the project. So this is an overall summary of visual. And so we see again the 7, still getting used to this. The 7 steps that we just looked at: programming, design schematics, and then developing those schematics into contract documents. Then those go out to bidding negotiation, into construction and post-evaluation. What's interesting is that, and we'll spend more time on this than anything else, is the design considerations. What are those? And the fact that they go through half of the steps. And it's just getting clarification every step of the way. And we'll see in the schematic design, sometimes there are mock-ups or not. Sometimes the mock-ups appear here or during construction. And then lighting and control plans both happen in the contract and development of the design phases. So design considerations. We've got to talk to the owners, the client, got to see what is it that we need to see in the space. What are we highlighting? What's the architecture like? What kind of space are we talking about? What kind of windows and so on? How much lighting do we need? What's quantity? Well, how much money do we have? How much energy do we have? And do we have any maintenance and security concerns? So so we'll go through these 8 separately now. So like the design team preferences might have to do, again, with the material finishes, architectural style of the space, what's in it in terms of furniture and location, and their color and their reflection, art, signage, anything that's really special and stands out, and the need for flexibility. And that comes back to controls and dimming and switching. So depending on how much money we have, all of those things are good. Then the age of people is going to make a big difference if you're designing a kitchen and a bathroom for a young couple, a family, or an elderly couple. Or, well, I guess maybe not so much I guess you might do some bigger kitchens for homes for the elderly, but in any case, the age of the occupants makes a big difference, because as we get older, not only do we lose a bit of flexibility in our vision, but we lose the ability to see with as much clarity. So contrast is very important. And you don't want huge levels of light contrast, because that becomes even harder to read and so forth. So again, times of occupancy during the day, well, that's maybe not so important in this case of kitchen and baths, but it is something that we would consider, and again, very generic to this presentation. And then our need for light, what kind of space are we wanting to create? Architectural opportunities. This is a section where we spend a lot of time, and it's interesting in putting this presentation together. I can usually talk about this without looking at slides, because it's something that I've done for so long, but it actually took me time to review and find this information, and to actually sit and go, well, how do I do this? Because you do it for so long, and it just, the questions of what you ask a client or how you come up with ideas is actually so natural that I don't actually sit down and go step by step and check off the questions. But perhaps 25 years ago when I started, I might have had, okay, did I check this or did I think of this? So like anything else, it occurs far more naturally than this kind of very structured, linear type of process that we're going through now. But like light, architecture and interior spaces are so fabulously different. And you know, depending on the constraints that you have and the client needs, that can go on. You can offer as many ideas as you have. Photometric considerations are more to do, obviously, with light. Photometrics is actually the study of light levels. So each lighting manufacturer that provides usually commercial fixtures, but also a lot of, probably not chandeliers, but a lot of fixtures that are aimed, will provide some diagrams that have the amount of light and how the light spreads. So that's photometric information. And the luminance is how much light falls on something. So if I had a light meter, I would actually be putting my light meter here, and the luminance is the amount of light that I can't see the light, but how much it is hitting this. The illuminance is what we see. So is the light that's reflected off of this surface. So it's a reverse. Contrast levels are going to be very, and that's a very important thing in both interior and exterior lighting levels and spaces, because it's what makes the space be very dramatic or very intimate or very bland or very general, very public. So it is what creates, contrast is what helps to create the feeling of a space. Glare is when you can't see what you're doing because you either have light directly in your eye or light bouncing off a surface that's really shiny. That's not usually good, but sometimes you want a little bit of glare. Sometimes you want a little bit of sparkle and of some direct light coming from a very low level lamp that's bare. And then the distribution, so like how is light aimed? What are the beams doing? Like, is it something general and diffuse, or is it aimed at a wall or at something even more small to accent that? Budget, not only dealing with the initial cost, but of what things cost over time. And energy, the codes, of course, that we have to adhere to, and sometimes in renovations, of course, how much energy do we actually have available? Actually, energy, you know, what we should put under there, it's also how much energy do we actually have to deal with a project? So that could be one. Maintenance, lamp performance is a big one, but also when you do calculations in lighting, they have this thing called luminaire dirt depreciation, especially in, not so much in residential, but in commercial spaces. You need to account for the fact that they're not cleaning their spaces weekly, and things that are installed very high may not get cleaned very often. So dust accumulates, and therefore the brightness of the luminaire is not going to be as strong and therefore efficient. So that's something we take in consideration. And security, safety and security will be another one, mostly commercial. So I promise, now that we've gone through the programming, so these are like the design considerations that are in the four first steps. We'll jump to schematic and not so much detail. So the schematic design, now that we have accumulated all of this information, what are the requirements of my client, and what, you know, all of these things that we just talked about, how am I going to help them to solve their problem? And what things do I know, such as lighting fixtures and lighting styles, and how much money, and you sort of start getting pictures of what could be possible. And then you start presenting specific ideas that are still conceptual, but it gets you the process going, and a little bit with scheduling and budgeting requirements too that you have to look at to make sure that things are going in the right direction for your client. And then importantly, I think we have to get really a review and approval process to make sure that the client and you are on the same page. Design development is, again, taking the concept and making sure that we are making it work. Making sure that our ideas are working in the depth of the plenum, if there are any mechanical or electrical systems that are existing, how to coordinate with them or make them align with new things and sprinklers, and maybe not so much in a house, some houses. But all of the building systems need to be taken in consideration. And I find lighting, it can go both ways. Some people really like to show off and have like a beautiful chandelier in their space, or objects, floor lamps, table lamps. And that's a very decorative, very residential aspect. But some residences that I've done, they don't want to see any lighting. They just want to see the light, which means they want to see the architecture. So in that case, it's going with things that are very minimal, like tucked into the ceiling and recessed. And we look for architectural features or valences or ceiling details that we can incorporate into the design and into the furniture in very subtle ways. So that would be, again, continuing the development of those ideas, making sure, again, that the pricing and the delivery and all of those things are coordinated together. And then sometimes if it's architecturally linked, like a light valence, then you would need to really draw and make sure that the details work. And then start drawing it and planning it. So the contract documents, again, still part of the design, but finalizing all of the controls and the systems and making sure that the economy that can be had with different types of sensors, or like an occupancy sensor, or any of those kinds of things really taken into consideration. And then in a more complete job, well, sometimes I've worked with residences that are more like estates, and they're like 10 to 20,000 square feet. So then I actually have a lighting catalog cut package. So they know what every fixture style is going to be, and it has a reference letter that's in the plans, so it's easy for the contractors to bid on the package, but also the client knows specifically what each thing is going to look like and where it's going to be placed. And then how it's controlled. And controls are really fascinating today, not just the remote things, but there's these little light panels that you can put almost anywhere and access remotely to have your house look a certain way when you arrive, or different times of the day. And then the bidding and negotiation party starts. That's always fun. And a lot of times I think that this is my most dreaded time, because that's when contractors try to really make the best of a hard situation when their client or possible client is not really wanting to spend more than X amount of dollars. And so they're often what happens is we get the nice little catalog cut package that I put together totally changed into what is an equivalent catalog cut package. And often things might look the same, but they're not the same. Or the materials are not the same, or the fastenings and the way that it's constructed is not the same. Recently we did a project with the National Gallery of Canada. They were wanting to replace all of their short bollards outside. They have about 100 bollards around the site, around the building. And I was actually amazed. Well, I mean, time, and they're outside, they rust. And I'm like, oh, it's already time to change those? because I had worked on the original project when it got built. And so I was like, yep, it's been over 20 years, that's there. So we started looking at different things and wanted to keep Safdie's vision alive. I didn't want to put something totally different or light the space differently. So we went, I looked, and there were a lot of bollards that look very much the same, but they all have photometrics, or the light gets distributed in the light quantities totally different from one thing to the other. So thankfully, they had a small budget that we went out and borrowed and bought different fixtures and did a test on the coldest day of the year, or second coldest day. And it was amazing what we saw, because sometimes the same amount of light as an average is the same amount of light, but there would be rings. So who here doesn't know what a bollard is? It's they're short. I don't usually spec these very often because they're everything a woman doesn't want outside. They're, a thing that's this tall. You don't have any light above to see what anybody's face looks like, and it shines light right underneath your skirt. It's like really not so woman-friendly. So I wanted to see what we could do with these things, and the original design of the bollards there had a small Lexan or a cover that was like metal, but in the center there was a little bit of light that glowed up. So when you got close to the bollard, you had some light on your face. So we went and chose about 7 different styles of similar looking things. Actually, they were virtually the same if you didn't know the difference in the daytime. But then there were like rings around them, so there would be light and dark and light, or the photometrics, so the light would only go this far or 10 feet. Some of them, actually there was one that had a special glass that refracted or changed the light's direction, so it also lit upwards and not just downwards, which we picked. And that one was the most expensive, but it's not because of the way that it looked that we picked it or it got chosen. It's because of the way it got maintained. And this we could for sure have not realized with as much ease or convinced upper management to spend, I don't know, it was about a third more money, which is a lot when you've got 100 fixtures. Because every other bollard was mounted in a special way that was similar for all 6 of the 7 that required special tools and things on the inside like the ballast, which you would need to have access to, were more difficult to maintain. This other fixture, it was like just, you lifted the whole thing up and it had an interior thing that, without going into the details, it was like a maintenance drain. And that's often, unfortunately, a very separate budget, and maybe not so much something that you have to deal with in a residential context. But all to go back to whether it's maintenance or looks or quality or how things are fastened or the quality of a socket and how long it's going to take before it falls apart. Those are the kinds of things that you can't necessarily see unless you look at objects. So beware. You don't always have to pay more for quality, but if you're paying less than half for something that most people sell at a certain price, you know that you're most likely going to have some maintenance issues or going to have to replace it. So you pay now or pay later. That's my okay, that was long. That was my thing about product specification, because that is what substitutions are all about. And you most likely have to deal with that. So the possible savings are pay now or pay later. And the construction is always fun. I love this part. It's always so amazing. Whether it's a renovation and you find all sorts of different things, or it's something new, no matter how well you've planned it, there's always going to be a bunch of things that are unforeseen. And I thought this was a funny expression. This is actually from the IES book, Project Punch List. and that's actually a list of things that are not working on the site that need to be addressed. And I'm thinking, now why would it be called that? Is it? Yeah, it's like, you do this or I come and punch you. And then often we've done final adjustments, like even aiming the luminaires and stuff, and that's a lot of fun too, because that's when everything is there, the art and things really come alive. And then post-occupancy evaluation for residential is often very informally done, but it's such an important part of the learning process of what went well. And we're all human, things happen, it's not always in our control, errors happen. So how can we learn from things and move on? So coming back to, okay, I can breathe now. We did the whole process. So is there any questions before I move on to the next section? No? Okay. So another way of looking at it when I design things is, so now I'm going to jump into more of a freer way of thinking. The first section of the talk was really a very specific process based on a list of all the things that you would not want to forget when you're doing design if you'd never done it. But in essence, what we want to do when we're creating projects, and often our clients come with ideas and budgets, we have to figure out, what do we want it to look like and what do we want it to feel like? And what's going to be happening there that they need light in specific places. So actually, that foot didn't come out very well, but it's a little candle that GE made a gazillion years ago because they measured light in the old system as a foot candle. Ha-ha. And a foot candle is actually if a candle, not a light bulb, but one candle a foot away on a surface of 1 foot by 1 foot, or a 1 foot circle, would be 1 foot candle. And if it was in meters or in the metric, 1 lux, it would be 1 candle 1 meter away on the surface of a meter square. So it's about 10 to 1. And most engineers I work with like, well, for a variety of reasons, also because of time constraints and the fact that they don't spend much time in their education in university as lighting designers. They maybe have 1 course or 1 day. I don't know which. Depends on the engineer, I guess. I do love them. Their main job is to make sure that it works with the controls and the existing electrical systems inside the building, and that there's enough light. So many people are concerned mostly with, how much light do I need somewhere? But it's not just the amount of light, it's the amount of contrast and the amount of how it fits and how it reflects off of other surfaces. And in a fuller sense, how it's going to make us feel, and what is it going to bring into evidence, and the beauty, what beauty is it going to bring? What do we want to feel in the space? And it's so endless, how like in kitchens, you probably don't want it to feel forbidding or business-like, but you might want it to be flexible, to have some light for when you're cooking that's higher levels than when you're entertaining and the kitchen is still in view, et cetera, et cetera. And you also want to be concerned about color, not just the color of the objects that you're lighting, but the color of the light itself. I'm extremely, actually excited about the new LEDs, especially Philips and GE. I'm just about to look at some Osrams next, some Osram lamps. But I saw actually, Christoph was in the back and look at this really cool lamp. The Philips LED that replaces a 60-watt bulb. Actually, could you go and get us one? They're really cool. I don't know if we can light it, but it actually won a $10 million prize a few years ago. Won the government of the states, the U.S. state government, had this carrot dangling, $10 million plus a contract of replacing all of the standard A19 bulbs, so like a regular bulb, in all their government buildings throughout the States. So you can imagine the amount of research that it took. I mean, they had different criteria they had to meet, and color was one of them. And so they won it, and it's been great. Now other people are making different versions of. But what I was so excited about in the new LEDs is two things. Actually three things. The color of the lamp, of the light it emits, is just amazing. Dimmability, oh my God, you know, it's not like the screw bulbs of the old fluorescents you're trying to replace and you can't dim them. I mean, that was a stepping stone, right? And then the fact that there's different styles and sizes of bases. So you can have little chandelier, tiny bases in an LED now, and they look beautiful and they're dimmable. Or you can have some par lamps, like, you know, security lamps for the outside. So it's a step like in the right direction. And I'm telling you, in almost 30 years in the business, it's the only thing that I've seen that is this big of a jump, and I think that it's going to continue that way to develop it. So these are the kinds of things that I didn't jump into in the earlier part of the presentation, but color and the style of lamp and the efficiency of the lamp is a big one. And why does it matter? Well, obviously because people live in it. And not only is it going to affect how we look and how we feel when we see other people that look sick or look healthy because the light is too blue or too pink. This is just fluorescent on here, fluorescent lighting. And yeah, that's right. So this is a warm white. This is another type of warm white, and this is a cool white. And they have different CRIs, which are coloring, rendering, and index. So if you have a higher coloring, rendering index, it means that it's a better fluorescent lamp. And sometimes I like to use fluorescent in kitchens for either under counter or over the top of the cupboards. But it also not only affects our color, but the color of things. Like, so when you're choosing colors for your tiles and for your paint and your counter, it's important to know what kind of lighting you're going to have, because that's going to actually affect the way it's going to look in the end. It's amazing, actually, how much a light source can change the color of of a paint sample. And then, of course, there's color in a totally different sense, which is now, especially with LED, you know, changing colors and chromotherapy, light therapy, and one of the clients of the big residence that I just finished has this LED thing in his shower, and not only does it have blue, but he explained that it is part of an entire system where you press a button and you have a sequence of blue and thundering noise, and then it changes into calm and whiter, and then toward like the sunset calmer colors. Right? So it's like some people have this whole experience in their bathroom, and it, you know, maybe they see God, I don't know. But even if you just want to have a beautiful bath, and, you know, a candle is one way. But now we have the technology to make a space really unique, and Las Vegas. And the considerations for design, obviously, as many as there are, like I said in the beginning, there is no perfect solution. It's easy to look at a design and to fault it for one thing or another, but until you know what people started with in terms of, you know, the costs and budgets and timing that they had, like a lot of beautiful products are long delivery items, so it's all based on the music. And this is lots of terms that are used in the lighting description of lighting spaces and lighting industry. So I'm just going to go over some examples of actual spaces that you might work with. What's my timing like? Good. It's what, 7? Okay. Diffuse lighting, which is, and this is not necessarily with one type of just chandeliers or just downlights, or I'll go through some of this in pictures and it'll be easier to follow. Diffuse light is something that's very general and provides ambient light. Direct is actually when a source is lighting directly. It doesn't need to be a spotlight, but it could be something that hangs and lights directly on a table. That's direct light. The diffuse portion would be if that is glass, it's diffusing light out. If it's metal, it's just direct light. Indirect is something that's often mounted upside down, so your light source is within the container, lighting up onto the ceiling or onto a wall. And then decorative lighting and the wild bathroom stuff and chromotherapy. Ways of lighting, so task lighting, and again, depending on the task, you can do that in different ways. Accent lighting, accenting paintings, accenting flowers, accenting art, whichever it is, or accenting a task, it could be even. The orientation, so that may not be a very loud light source, but it's most of the time just to give you a sense of where you are. So often it's going to be one of those night lights or something that's like that, but incorporated into the architecture. And then anything that's decorative and ambient, which is again very general. So direct, here are direct task light and task light combos. This is directly down, but like I said, some diffuse. And that's the same thing, the task at the sink. Under counter lighting is actually task lighting. And there are so many different ways of doing that. And depending on the finish at the back and the shininess will give a different effect. Sometimes you can actually see the lights reflecting in your tile, which you really want to be careful of and what you choose. And then depending on if you go with something that's linear or some LED that's mounted more like in a puck light style, you'll get something very different in terms of look. And the spacing of this is really important because visually, again, when light is not working properly, that's when we notice it. So if it's lined up with the vertical elements or even here it's centered on the cupboards, it makes sense. You don't question it. It's just part of the composition. Now, the examples I'm showing you, I just lifted off the internet. I'm not suggesting that they're great or that they're terrible. I'm just using them as examples. It really is, like I said, so varied. So this is a direct and task lighting. Although this fixture here is indirect because it's lighting the ceiling, there's some direct lighting that's actually that's used recessed fixtures, but directly lighting the task. So it's direct task lighting. And in here you get the task lighting at the back with some kind of fluorescent tube and then direct right above. Decorative is also going to give you a whole different kind of feeling of a space. And depending on how close your fixtures are to the wall, you're going to see these patterns. So again, color of the light and the spacing is going to be hugely important on how that looks in the overall space. This is indirect. These fixtures that are mounted on the wall are actually shining up, giving the space more of a feeling of openness and height. And then, of course, the decorative fixtures that really give it a punchy look. Accent lighting can be, like in this case, this is actually glary, but it's beautiful because it's only small amounts of glare that are like, playful and star-like. And accent lighting can actually be something that lights the space as well. So it doesn't need to be these just lighting an image. It can be like an accent in itself because it's providing rhythm and playing with the articulation of the space itself. Most of the time, you're going to be working with layers, and that's really what you want to do. So you want to start with a general amount of light. What are we going for in terms of a general feeling? And then where are the tasks that I need to be lighting? And then focusing in on those. And then seeing if there's any decorative, playful things that you can do, whether lighting, through glass or cupboards, or adding again and playing with architectural features to enhance the overall space. So for bathroom design, again, both for bathroom and kitchens, I think it's really important to work with layers of lighting. So, from the general to the task specific. And then in the bathroom, the main task is, well, to wash, but also to make yourself beautiful or handsome. So you want light that's going to make you that to start with. You want to get all the chances on your side. So bathroom mirror lighting, or lighting at the mirror, what I find works the best is something that's coming from both sides. So you have light coming and shining equally on your face. You're not getting the flashlight effect. When you were kids, you put the big flashlight. You're not getting that from a lighting coming right on top, and big shadows. And it helps to, not get so many nicks, because you can actually see what you're doing. And at the bath, one thing that many people forget is that yes, we shower in bathtubs, but actually many people that take baths are, you don't want to be seeing a direct source when you're lying down. So this is beautiful artwork, okay? That works. Recessed fixtures, again, with really strong shadows, because they're close. The closer you are to the wall, the more contrast you're going to get, and those beams of light are going to appear. And surface-mounted, I pressed another thing. Sorry. Here you've got surface-mounted at the ceiling and surface-mounted on the wall, so wall-mounted fixtures of the same style. These are actually downlights, but in a stylized version, so you just get a different feeling of space. Now, with direct light only, so something that's either, it could be a can at the ceiling, but most of the time direct only is from recessed sources. You want to make sure that the spaces that you're lighting, when you only have downlights or pot lights, are actually spaces that have a lot of light colors in them. I find that only, and this is just from seeing spaces where architects or clients have wanted to see no fixtures themselves, but just the effects of light. When you don't have an object that glows and that provides light equally everywhere, you have these very strong, in this case it's softened because the distance from the wall is not as close, so you get a bit of a softer look on the wall, but it gets to be very austere in its way of looking, because you only have surfaces that are lit from above, and it's very unnatural, I find. So that's one of my comments. Wall sconces, are unlimited in their style. If they're used at the mirror, like again on this side, you've got something that's going to be general light, glowing, therefore light on your face. Here, that's probably going to work okay, but not as nice. You're going to get some light from above, and it's diffused, so it's not like the drastic shadows of a downlight, but it's serving the function of decorative at the same time. So what I don't recommend is something that's a hard finish, so something that the light doesn't actually glow from. And then if it is that, then at least mount it lower so it has a chance to come back from the ceiling and give a more ambient or more general light to the space. And beware of how dark your colors are. It's amazing. White actually reflects like 90% of the light. Black will only reflect 10%. So that's like, huge difference. And if you have a dark space, you're going to need basically either twice the wattage or twice the amount of light that comes from a bulb, or twice as many fixtures. So it's, unless you want it to look dim and intimate, and you know, you're not doing your makeup there. And then many fixtures are the same, but depending on how they're used, they look totally different too. So that's a consideration that you know, we're always playing in the imagination when we're designing. And then playfulness, like this looks very beautiful in this picture, but it would be really uncomfortable to have a bath in there unless those fixtures were turned off. And then, oh goodness, you know, if any, like this is like the size of an apartment, this bathroom, both of these bathrooms. Here you've got very specific accent lighting, and obviously some dimmed wall sconces here on the side, and some downlights. And here you've obviously got some daylight coming in to this bathroom, but you've got a totally different look just because things are well, architecturally and stylized differently. But if you put one lighting and exchanged it, the spaces would also look very different. And again, you don't really notice this unless it's a problem. Sometimes you want to actually not have a bathroom that looks like that, but you might. But if you did, you would want the light to actually enhance what it is that you're trying to do and organize the space so that it's not looking like these. Actually, now they make not only circular patterns of light, but they make framed patterns, or they have these beautiful little square downlights, but sometimes these guys will actually make a very different pattern of light on the wall. So you want to keep your lighting organized with the type of space and finishes and design. So for kitchens, it's basically the same idea, except that in kitchens there are more verticals because of the cabinetry, and you definitely want to make sure that whatever the center of the light is going to fall on or in between the cupboards. We are trained to look at organizing things on paper first, right? Because we've got to tell someone how to build it, and this is always done and planned. You want to organize it so that it looks nice and neat and it's in a nice little square, and then you get on site and the ceiling is nice and well organized, but visually, lo and behold, we have our vertical view of and nothing matches. So if nothing else, the most important thing in kitchens for me is making sure that the plan that's horizontal still looks organized. Ideally, it's all lined up, even with other things, not just itself, but aligned with the vertical planes. If you only have something at the center, you're going to be working in your shadow. If you only have something above, you have to make sure that you place it in the right area or aim it from the sides, not just down, because you're going to be working in shadow. Under cabinets, you have to make sure that you're not going to be looking at the light source, which so many times I've seen from different angles. Light reflects at the same angle as it comes in. So ideally, you get your light source, whether it's in the bathroom, but also from a counter. You want the light to travel sideways and bounce back, especially if you're working with something that's a direct type of light. And then again here, your area, if you're under 25, they're suggesting 2-foot candles. Here, over 65, that's like 4 times as much light. Yeah. And then ways here of dealing with grazing textures. So the closer your light is, if you've got beautiful tile that's matte and that's very textured, that's going to enhance it. If you want it to appear more flat, you want to be a bit further away. And then you want to space your lights equally distance, unless you're trying to work within columns or have some other kind of rhythm happen. And so again, the same type of idea. You want to make sure that your lighting is not going to be causing shadows and not going to be in view. So here, seeing what happens with shadows, it makes it interesting, and it's okay. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's just a matter of deciding if that's what you want beforehand. This is a great example of what not to do. Here with these light fixtures that are obviously nicely placed between all in the ceiling, but that are so not lined up with things that it still just looks horrible. And it competes with the ceiling source. So reflectance values, again, that's what I was just talking about earlier. White, 70 to 80%, and up here to dark gray, 10 to 15. Plaster material versus granite versus mirror. All of these kinds of things are going to affect how much light and how it reflects. Placing things too close to the edges of things causes things like that. And then again, deciding, do we want pattern to be visible here and have a rhythm underneath things? And how does that look? How does that rhythm, if you're face on to those cabinets, how does that rhythm look with the vertical planes up above? Or do you want something more linear? And then, playing with inserting light in different places. And of course, deciding how much dimming and how you're going to set things up so you can break the space down into various types of moods. And giving the space some clarity. So like the bad bathroom example, when you've got too many things going on, or even like too many rhythmic things, it adds visual noise, which I find is not very becoming or aesthetic. And there's so many ways of reinforcing design intent that there's no reason not to. And playing with the space itself. And of course, style is endless. So we've moved beyond our cave days of needing light, but I think this is one of those beautiful, I can see here there's a bit of a temple column in the back. And there are some amazing temples around the world that have used light to signify things at different times of year. And but we've moved beyond the cave, thank God. But it's still so important. And without light, you have a dark cave. So good luck. And I'm here if you ever need me. So thank you very much for your time. Yeah.
Almost 90% of the time, people will say to me, I only want warm white. Like for task light, I'm not talking about general lighting, but for under the cabinet. So I just normally say, okay, we'll do warm white. But when, in your opinion, would a cool white, like say for instance an LED, same fixture, one's a warm white, one's a cool white, which one would be better under what situation?
I think most of it really has to do with client taste, with your taste, yeah. If they really wanted, say, a kitchen that is, like I want metal and I want everything to look super white and...
like linear Japanese?
Yes, then I would probably get them to see and test a cool white. Because the warm white might, with a metal, will conflict or it might soften it. So it depends, again, what the end result that you're aiming for. But cool white will reinforce the blues and the greens and the grays that have blue and green in them. And then the warm white, there's two types in the fluorescence. There's several more than that, but the typical ones are the 3000 Kelvin and the 3500 Kelvin. And cool white is 4000 Kelvin. So the middle one is the one I usually like the most, because it's the 35. It's not too warm, but it still gives you a sense that you're healthy versus the blue, which I find very cold. Okay. Especially in our climate. Like this is another consideration. If we were designing for a space, a kitchen in Florida, you might not want to have so many warm lighting schemes. You want it to feel like it's airy and bright and cool. So.